believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? What a bucket list moment I just had. Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Brendas, also known as Ricky France, and a amazing conversation I just had on Mayor Glenn Jacobs, but many people like myself around my age group who grew up watching wrestling know him better as KANE. And they always say not to meet your heroes because you'd be disappointed, but that couldn't be more untrue when referring to KANE. The way people would refer to him in documentaries and podcasts, and the way he would always present himself when being interviewed, always gave me reason to believe that he was a sincere and great person. And now that he's in politics, it only highlights those aspects of him even more. He's willing to push back when not popular. He's willing to fight for what he believes in, and he's willing to fight for other people in his community. And I can't thank him enough for coming on the show, and hopefully I didn't sound as nervous as I probably felt. With that said, let's try to get this intro done and over with so we can jump right into the conversation. This is a Value for Value show. If you get some value out of these conversations or any of the conversations Ripple Effect Podcast tries to bring to you, please consider giving some value back. I know we're living in tough times, so if you can't financially support the show, don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. Don't feel bad about it. I know people hit me up and they talk about how they feel bad because they can't support the show yet or whatnot. Don't worry about it. Rate the show, review the show, tell people about the show, tweet the show, post it on whatever social media platform or video platform you're on. This is a open source podcast. I want the conversations to get out there. Obviously, big tech censor shows like mine, so any help is much appreciated. I don't care if I get the downloads or the views. I just want to get these conversations out there. If you can support the show, there's a couple ways you can do so. We have a PayPal account if you want to send a one-time donation. We also have a Patreon page, and once a month I do a podcast with my Patreon supporters. We get to connect, we get to chat, and then I release it as a episode. So for as little as $1 a month, you can be on an episode, you can hang out with me, you can hang out with other listeners, and it's always a good time. So please consider donating as little as $1 a month. It's a small contribution, but if everyone helps a little bit, it can go a long way in helping me reach my goal of finally doing this podcast full time. We also have crypto wallets for Ethereum and Bitcoin if you want to send crypto. We have a merch store with tons of awesome stuff. All the t-shirts and hoodies and all the merch you see me wearing during the episodes are available at the merch store. And if you are watching the video version of these episodes, please watch them on free speech platforms like Rockfin that gives you the ability to tip episodes you like and contribute to content creators you enjoy. And if you like the intro music for this podcast, check out Theory 6. It's my solo music project. The song's called The Ripple Effect. You can find it anywhere you can get digital downloads, anywhere you can stream music, you can find Theory 6. And then the last couple ways of supporting the show is checking out my sponsors. One is Content Safe, which is how I get these video episodes on all the video platforms I'm on. I upload it to one location. He syncs it to all my other channels. And this service was super important when I got kicked off YouTube. Thanks to Content Safe, I had the peace of mind of knowing that my videos will be available on many other platforms. So I can't thank Matt and Content Safe enough for helping me spread what I think are very important conversations and content. And if you're a content creator, please check out Content Safe. Also check out the University of Reason. As you might know, Glenn Jacobs is a libertarian, and the University of Reason was created by one of my closest libertarian friends, Richard Grove, who's also the host of the Grand Theft World podcast. So please check out the University of Reason and the autonomy courses. Hopefully it's something that interests you, and it's a way of helping yourself and helping the show at the same time. The last way of supporting the show is checking out Element Electrolytes, created and formulated by Rob Wolf, who is a OG in the health and nutrition community. He's been on many podcasts, been interviewed in many documentaries, written many books, and just one of the most respected people in the paleo keto community. He noticed there was a lack of healthy and good options to stay hydrated, and many people who were doing paleo, keto, or fasting was having issues and symptoms that were related to dehydration. So he created Element Electrolytes. It's a powder you put in your water. It's potassium, magnesium, and sodium, premium ingredients, no sugar. It tastes good. It's good for you, and it can help with headache, fatigue, muscle soreness or tightness, many symptoms that might be due to dehydration. And best part is, if you use the link on my website or in the show description, all these links and all these ways of supporting the show will be in the show description and on my website. You'll get a free gift with every purchase. So every time you purchase Element Electrolytes using the link on my website or the link in the show description, you'll get a free gift and you can support the show at the same time. Last two things, we do have a Telegram group chat for listeners of the show. If you want to talk about episodes, share information, any of that type of stuff, please check out our Telegram group chat. And you can also find Ripple Effect Podcast now on Substack. I know Substack is growing and blowing up, and I'm glad it is because it seems like a great platform that doesn't censor people. So check out the Ripple Effect Podcast on Substack. Like I told you guys, you can find all these links in the show description or on my website, so please check out both. That's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Mayor Glenn Jacobs, also known as WWE Hall of Famer KANE, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
Thanks for having me on. First of all, I very much appreciate it. I was born in Madrid, Spain. My dad was in the Air Force at the time. I was born at Torrejon Air Base. Unlike you who came later to the U.S., pretty much right after I was born, probably within a year, we moved back to the States. When I was 4 years old, Dad retired from the military, and we moved to Northeast Missouri. My family is from the St. Louis area. I have one brother and one sister. They're both quite a bit older than I am. My sister's about 10 years older than I am. My brother's 8 years older than I am. And they obviously went their own way when I was young. So I kind of grew up as an only child out in the country, right? But I always want to play sports. It's my dream to play originally for the St. Louis Baseball Cardinals. When I was a little bitty kid, I wasn't very good at baseball because I was tall and clumsy. Switched to basketball because of my height. I was a pretty good basketball player, ended up going to college on a basketball scholarship. While I was in college, I ended up playing football as well. I hadn't played football in high school, but when I got to college, I started lifting weights and eating a lot more, I guess, and ended up putting on a lot of weight. And the football coach recruited me onto the football team. My eligibility was about up in basketball, and I wasn't going to play in the NBA. We knew that. So you might have a chance to play in the NFL because of your size. And sure enough, I was just a naturally gifted football player because of my size and athleticism, and looked like I was going to get a chance to play, and then hurt my knee pretty severely in practice one day. Went to the Chicago Bears camp as an undrafted free agent, but was cut immediately because I couldn't pass the physical due to my knee. That was a devastating moment for me. Probably the worst thing that happened to me up until that point in my life. I mean, all I'd ever wanted to do was play sports and athletics that played such a big part in my life, and didn't want to give it up. Still wanted to do something that involved athletics. And that's kind of how I got into professional wrestling. I thought I'm still a big guy, still a pretty good athlete despite having a bad knee. My degree is in English, so I know about history. I know about theater and drama. Give it a shot. And couple of years that were very lean of just learning the trade and traveling through the Midwest and not making any money, of course, but traveling several hundred miles over a weekend, but thought that I could be good at it, enjoyed what I was doing. So stuck with it. And then when people ask me, how did you move up? Well, it's just like everything else. It's really networking and meeting people that know people, and just expanding your circle that way. And that's what I did. And eventually I got to WWE, which is the Major League's professional wrestling. And a couple years after I arrived there, this character KANE was created for me, the brother of The Undertaker, who's arguably the most iconic figure in WWE, The Undertaker, and to be involved in that whole story was really a dream come true for me. Then, as my wrestling career was winding down, I was looking at what the next chapter of my life would be. I moved to East Tennessee the same year that I signed with WWE in 1995. My wife is from this area. I love it here. Had some opportunities to leave and go different places, but we just like it here. This is home for her, and it's become home for me. So as I was thinking about what do I want to do with my life as I'm moving to a different phase, I never wanted to get into politics. I'd always been interested in government and politics, mainly out of self-defense, because I'm a small government person, and I got interested because of what government could do to you, not what it could do for you, and understood that I don't want government doing much to me, right? But anyway, as I got to thinking about what could I do, and this position came open, my friend, who's congressman now, Tim Burchett, was county mayor at the time. He's term limited. So I knew that he wasn't going to run again, and figured, well, okay, cool. I could run for that seat. And local government's really important. We often discount that because all the stuff happens at the federal government level, but local government's really important. And I have more influence over my community than a U.S. congressman or U.S. senator does, frankly. So I was like, okay, it's a position, and you can actually do things as mayor too. You're not part of the legislative body where you have to get everyone to agree with you on stuff. You can kind of set the agenda and do some stuff. So all that appealed to me. So I decided to run. I won my Republican primary by 23 votes out of 45,000 that were cast. 40,550, I think exact numbers. So about 40,000 votes that were cast. Then won the general election. We're Republican areas, won the general election in a landslide. A few weeks ago, just won my second term, and here we are.
Yeah, congrats on that. That's awesome. And I've had Jesse Ventura on the show before too. There's something I feel like being a politician, a couple of things that are required is you have to be able to speak well in front of a crowd, maybe not worry so much about being a heel at times, because if you do something, then you stick to your guns, and so I think that there are some similarities. But in regards to your political philosophy, like what exposed you to libertarianism and those type of ideas, and how young were you when you started kind of diving into philosophies?
As I said, I've always been interested in government and politics. In my high school history class, I think I was a sophomore, and I portrayed Walter Mondale in a presidential debate, and never forget that, because this one, Geraldine Ferraro, he picked as his vice president's candidate. Was the first woman in that position. That's the last time in my life I was probably a Democrat, though. But in any case, I've always been kind of interested in it, and the reason is because just government has a big impact and influence over our lives. My parents are what I would call Goldwater conservatives. They're kind of old school Republicans, but we didn't talk about politics at the kitchen table or anything like that. But one of my earliest memories is driving with my mom and dad and sitting in the back seat of the car and going under some of the high voltage power lines, right? The ones with the big, huge towers. And I remember mom talking about how terrible eminent domain was when the government could just take your property away from you. I'm like 4 years old, and I remember that very clearly. So I've always been a skeptic of government ever since I was a little kid. As I went to college, just like everyone else, and I had a lot of professors that probably leaned the other way from where I did, and got exposed to that. And in some cases thought, hey, that's awesome. The world can be such a better place if government does all these things. Then I got out in the real world, and I'm like, wait a second. Government's not good at doing a whole many things. And everything it does, it takes our tax money to do, right? And then, I actually started making a living, and I'm like, wait a second. They're taking all this tax money, and then I see what they do with it, and a lot of times I either didn't agree with it, or you realize it's very wasteful, and like this is this is wrong. But at the time, this would have been in the late 90s, early 2000s. The Republican Party was really on kind of a social conservative. Uh, they were taking that path. And that made me uncomfortable too, because no, I don't want government messing with my checkbook. But I also figured if people weren't hurting other people, why is it the government's business what folks are doing, right? So I had this kind of quandary where I thought I was a conservative, but I didn't agree with that particular brand of conservatism on a lot of stuff. And then a friend of mine is actually Sean Morley, who is Val Venus in WWE, told me that I sounded like a libertarian, and that's what he was. And I literally said, dude, if you call me names, we're going to get into a fight. Okay. I had no idea what that term was. I'd never heard it before. So I started researching and actually went to a Libertarian Party website. And I was like, oh, okay, I agree with these guys on a lot of stuff. And I must be a libertarian, thinking that it was just the issues that mattered. But then as I dove in deeper and deeper, I realized we're talking about a political and a legal philosophy. And it wasn't just the issues. It was the core was the idea of libertarian philosophy, which literally is, you can't trespass against other people. The only time you can use violence is in self-defense. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I started reading people like John Stossel and Judge Napolitano and Ron Paul, and got exposed to Austrian economics. I'd never taken an economics course in high school or college. I'm not a math person, and I thought that's all economics was. And then I started to read about Austrian economics, which is the study of human action. And I realized, oh, wait a second, economics is not about numbers, it's about people and what people do. And that actually deepened my knowledge, my belief in libertarian philosophy. And I think that now I believe the whole thing is based around economics and how we economize and utilize our time free from government interference, with the exception of enforcement of contracts and the protection of private property. So that's it in a nutshell. All started, like I said, probably in the late 90s. And from there, I became a voracious consumer of economics and political philosophy for a number of years, and just open up some doors, and also went down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we're gonna expand on that. But before I do, my kids will kill me if I don't let them at least say hi, because they want.
Of course.
They said if I had you on, then they want to say hi. So, Ricardo, you want to say hi real quick?
Hey, buddy.
That's my son Ricardo, and then that's
hey, Ricardo.
Yeah, Ricardo, you want to show him what you got in your hand? He brought his KANE action figure.
Awesome. I love it, man.
The best one, because I've heard you say the original one is the one with the full mask.
Yeah, that's right. That's cool, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You'll be able to listen to it once it's up. But yeah, it's funny. I've heard you talk about Val Venus before, and I've looked into. He's so intelligent, and I know he's got kicked off Twitter, like many people who are out. But I've been kicked off YouTube. I'm no longer. I had Dr. Peter McCullough on and Dr. Robert Malone. And God forbid that I try to give people a different perspective. And I had these guys on before even they were on Rogan, and I love exploring all ideas, and I don't want government or big tech deciding what truth is for me. And but I've dove into Val Venus, Sean's just some of his videos. I think he's on Odyssey and Rumble, and what a fascinating guy. He's actually like way calmer than you would expect. I've seen him at protests, and he calmly debates these people, and he does it in such a manner that I'm like, how is he not losing his mind right now? Because he knows how wrong they are and how like extreme in their views they are. And that's the thing about Ron Paul that I absolutely loved was that I remember when he was running and they talked about how they're like, oh, where do you stand on abortions or whatever? And he's like, he stated his opinion, but he's like, but I believe I'm a libertarian in my beliefs. He's like, I believe the government shouldn't enforce whatever belief you may have. And to me, it's like, how can you disagree with that? And a lot of times I feel like people dismiss libertarian ideas because they just say, oh, they're too extreme. They're too extreme. And it's like, okay, well, if we keep saying every new perspective or philosophy on the way a world should work, a culture, a society is too extreme, then aren't we going to just keep recycling the same old crap that's not working?
Well, we have now. I remember few weeks ago, I was watching YouTube and I came across Ronald Reagan's address to the Republican National Convention in 1992. And in it, he said he wasn't running for president. He just finished up his second term and everything. But anyway, he says, I've lived long enough to see the birth and the death of communism. And I thought, that's kind of cool. I've lived long enough to see the death and the rebirth of communism, and unfortunately it is true. I mean, communism is rearing its ugly head again. And when I was a kid, man, you could not, I mean, there were no communists except in the Soviet Union and other places around the world. They were not here. And it's okay now to, pretty much say you're a communist, okay? And when we talk about libertarian philosophy, which is different than like Libertarian Party, and people confuse those and they're not the same thing. It's how we live our lives every day. No one thinks that you should pull a gun out and make someone do what you want them to do, even sometimes for very good reasons, right? And that's just it. All it is, let's limit the authority that government has over things, because in the end, everything government does is backed up by the threat of force. And I understand that local government, we do some stuff, roads and things like that, a little different from the federal government, but nevertheless, that's my philosophy, in that it's still, there are certain things that people locally expect. I get that. But we really need to confine what we do to those areas and not expand beyond that, and realize that the reason the government exists is to protect people's rights. And we forget about that all the time, because we have so many people now that want to run everyone else's lives and just believe that everything is about social engineering. And for me, I'm like, no, it's not. We need to leave people alone to live their own lives, and government should just have some guardrails that protect people's rights. And that's really about all we should be doing.
And it's funny because I was raised a Catholic, but I kind of lost interest in religion because I always like to go against the grain, and I listen to heavy metal. I like anything that was outside the norm, and religion seemed like, okay, it was boxed in thinking. And then I left a team to join another team called the Atheists, and I didn't realize, like, oh God, we're just as extreme.
Their religion too, yeah.
So. And but as I got older, and especially during the whole COVID time, I would have a lot of people on who happen to be religious, who happen to be spiritual, and a lot of people talk about this like it felt like a spiritual battle. And there's something about people who are spiritual, who ask these bigger questions, who dive into good versus evil, or just like think about our purpose and all these things, who can see the big picture. And a lot of people were struggling to see the baby steps. Like you said, like communism seems like a extreme word, and it's like, oh, we're far from communism. Well, 2 weeks of flattening the curve seemed pretty far from 3 years of suicide rates going up, small businesses dying, child abuse. Like there's so much bad that came from this. And you're a professional athlete. I'm the same way. I'm a gym rat. I love sports. I understand what the human body is capable of. I know that we're constantly around germs. I know that if you take care of your body, then it can do amazing things for, either recovering from injury or just dealing with viruses and germs. And And so I wasn't afraid of this. And then when you started kind of unraveling what was going on, and I've had Dr. Scott Jensen on and people who were outspoken very early. You got, I'm sure, some pushback because you were against the mask mandates. You were against a lot of these things, and I know some of the stuff was out of your control, but you did push back when you could. Were you worried about pushing back, knowing that you had like this wrestling following of these people who might disagree with you? And because it seems like sometimes people, and maybe because you're not active at the moment, it makes it easier. But were you ever concerned about like, hey, I might piss off some WWE fans who don't agree with me?
Yes, actually. And when I look back at the pandemic, by the end of March of 2020, I was like, what are we doing? I mean, I got the whole flatten the curve deal. And initially that was to help the hospitals not be overwhelmed. Okay. But my stance to the whole thing is this needs to be voluntary. We don't need to be forcing people to do this. You certainly don't need to be shutting down people's businesses. We should not keep kids out of school. And I might have been the first elected official to say some of the stuff that I was saying, just because. And I get it, everybody, and even me, I was like, oh, this is really bad. I just don't think we should be doing these things because I think the long-term damage is going to be worse. And sure enough, now you look back, and that's right. I mean, now almost everyone's saying the lockdowns were a mistake. We should have taken the advice of the Great Barrington Declaration, which said focus protection. We knew early on, who the folks that were most at risk from COVID were: older folks and people with immune compromised systems and those sort of things. And that's where we should have concentrated resources on and basically let the rest of society function like we always have. In fact, we're doing everyone a huge disservice not doing that. It became political, though. The masks were political. The vaccine ended up being political. Initially, when the vaccine came out, I was like, this is great because, again, for your at-risk population, they can get back to normal. Then it started being, well, everybody has to have the vaccine. I'm like, wait a second. We have this thing called immune systems, and if they're healthy, why would we be doing this? Why are we talking about little kids? That's insane. Especially when they are virtually not affected by COVID. Why are we talking about, these things? And it all turned political. And anytime something turns political, you do have to worry that, you're going to catch a lot of backlash. And I did. I mean, I got called horrible names. And I'm sure that I lost some wrestling fans. But at this point, my job is Knox County mayor. And to me, it's bigger than that. I mean, I have to say what I feel is right. And, I can't just sit back. And if I see something I think is really, really wrong in the position that I'm in now, I mean, I do have some influence, and some I can help mold some opinions, really much bigger than just local stuff for me because of who I am. And I have to do that. But we saw the same thing when the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. I put out a tweet and it was very innocuous and just said, because constitutionally, whether you agree with abortion or not, constitutionally, the decision was correct. And then it should be a state decision, not one made by the federal government. Basically, all I said was I'm happy that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And here in Tennessee, we're going to put in more stringent protections for the unborn. Oh my God. I mean, you had people that just went nuts, and some of my colleagues in the wrestling business, just jumped all over me. And I'm just going, guys, this is my opinion. Okay. And I actually know this better than you do as well. But, we live in a day and age now with social media where everybody thinks they should comment on everything. Nevertheless, in the end, again, I mean, I just, I have to do and say what I think is right. And if I don't do that, I literally can't live with myself. So yeah, like this is probably going to tick some people off, but it's worth it. And then also it's pretty amazing because then people kind of accept it and shrug their shoulders and go on, and then I also have to wonder, if you offend people so easily by telling them what you think is the truth and something that's really non-offensive, but they just disagree with you, If you offend them that badly, do you really want them on your side to begin with?
Well, the problem is we can't even discuss these issues, right? And they're not black and white. They're very complicated. Even if you're for abortions, you can disagree on, well, you're for abortions. How long long is the pregnancy before you're not for abortions? Like, so again, there's gray areas. It's not so cut and dry. And one of the things that makes the U.S. Unique is that there are states' rights, right? Like and the other thing too, it's like what happened to My Body, My Choice when they were mandating the vaccines for little kids who they were more likely to get harmed by the seasonal flu than they are COVID, and yet you're mandating vaccines for them. People who can't go to work without, we're losing their jobs if they didn't get vaccinated. And now we look at all the athletes that are passing out. And I mean, I just had Tucker on in the background last night when I was in the kitchen with the kids. And I mean, one, it amazes me that he's the only like mainstream show that actually gets to spark these conversations. But what's insane is people like yourself and myself, like he's saying the same things 2 years later that we were saying. And now people are openly accepting it, but somebody has to be accountable because I've heard you in many interviews talk about this. It's like the long-term negative effects of those lockdowns, of those masks. I mean, the poor kids who our kids, we end up homeschooling them for a year because of the mask. I'm like, they're not going to school. Like, there's no, if my kid drops his mask, is there going to be a teacher to replace it? If he goes to the bathroom and drops it, if he sneezes in it, I would bring my kids to school, and I would see kids wear the same mask every single day, drop it, put it on, and I'm like, how is this helping their health? I'm like, this is just insanity. And it wasn't about science, it was about compliance. And like you said, everything became political, where ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, we had doctors with PhDs, people who practice medicine, saying that there's some success with this, but because we had a fast track this vaccine, this mRNA vaccine, and for emergency authorization, they couldn't admit that anything else had any potential would work potentially. So they demonized everything. And then, I think it was even in New York where they made it illegal to prescribe these drugs, which is insane because that
was all over the country. I mean, they were demonized. And, Trump would talk about hydroxychloroquine, and then, someone drank a bottle of aquarium cleaner and it's because of him. And it's like, no, it's, and you're right. I mean, we could not objectively observe and talk about anything, and that's the problem you get into with centralized bureaucracies, because one person makes a decision, and if it's wrong, it radiates through the whole system. Whereas when things are decentralized, you can try all sorts of different stuff. And that's what we should have been doing and seeing, competition, what emerged. And you're exactly right. You look back and there was a lot of evidence that things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were actually effective if they were used early on, but still, those modalities were never seriously talked about among the medical establishment for political reasons. And then again, we get to the vaccine, and it went from being, it's completely effective, to now they're saying it doesn't even stop the spread, which means it's not even a vaccine. Okay. But it was all political. And that's actually, the COVID-19 killed a lot of people and did a lot of physical harm, and that's an absolute travesty. But our reaction to it and what we did, what the government did, and how easily all that was accepted, I think in the long run, that's going to be the long-term tragedy from this entire episode of human history.
Yeah, and I think that you talked about getting involved locally, which I think a lot of people kind of got exposed to that idea during the lockdown. Like, oh my God, what are my schools doing? Oh my God, like I don't have any control over any of this, and people are forcing this stuff onto me. I think people started getting involved much more. They started doing a little bit more research, as long as you could, because eventually big tech, YouTube, everybody started. Yeah, because it's like you use the term social engineering. It's absolutely social engineering. If freedom of speech is supposed to protect unpopular speech, because popular speech doesn't need protecting. Obviously, if I'm saying what everybody agrees with, what do I need protecting for? Like, let people get all the information, then we are intelligent enough to filter out what makes sense or doesn't make sense. But when you're deciding what truth is for me, it's literally social engineering, because our opinions are based on the information we have access to. You are controlling the information we have access to. People who have been on my show, even shows that you've been on, other shows, have been censored, suppressed, all for just stating a different opinion. And that's concerning. What are some of the issues that now are reelected? I'm sure you have some issues that you think are ones that need maybe the majority of your focus or more of your focus. What are the type of things that you think are the most concerning that you need to deal with?
The biggest thing that we face here, as far as kind of universal terms that everyone can relate to, is the drug epidemic and the number of lives that are being destroyed, the number of people that are dying. It's gone from the opioid epidemic to now fentanyl and methamphetamine. And it's worse than ever. What's very frustrating for me is before the pandemic, we did some things. We put together an initiative called All for Knox, which is basically getting all of the community working on this thing together. And our drug related deaths, overdoses, and then long-term chronic use. But they were going up, and they started to peak. And we were right to where it's like, okay, we're finally going to start going the other way. And then the pandemic hit, and now it's gone off the charts. And those are lives lost. And then we look at the damage that's being caused to society, economically, socially, everything. It's huge. And no one has an answer for it. We're also, just like a lot of other places, we're dealing with homelessness like we've never had to deal with here before. I don't think we're nearly in the situation that, say, Los Angeles, San Francisco are in. But nevertheless, I mean, it's here, and more people are complaining about it, rightfully so. Mental health is also a big issue that we're dealing with. And of course, the addiction and mental health are an enormous contributor to the homelessness problem. And also, how do we align our economy with the innovation economy of the 21st century? It's no longer manufacturing that's driving everything. Now it's innovation, which means that you have to have more people in the workforce that have technology degrees, and your workers have to have more technology education than they've ever had before. These are not, again, that stuff that's not necessarily germane just to us, but it really, I think that every community across the country is dealing with these things in some way or another.
Yeah, what's your opinion on the college debt and what that whole topic? I mean, I think as a libertarian, you probably agree with myself that college is kind of a scam anyways. You come out of it in debt, and then you're basically enslaved by your debt, because now you have to be stuck in a job. You don't have the flexibility to try different things or explore something that's maybe more outside the box, because now you're stuck with that debt. But what's your opinions on it? Do you think it's a good thing, bad thing, or?
I think that the big issue actually is student loans started to make college more affordable. And what's happened is college has gotten more and more expensive. And instead of a pay-go system where people were able to save some money, maybe work through college and put themselves through college, or come out with a little bit of debt, now it's all deferred till later, and you're paying huge amounts. It has not made college any less expensive. It's made a lot more expensive. Meanwhile, the universities have built a lot of really nice buildings, and their staff and administration have exploded. But I don't think that the quality of education of the people that are going through the system has necessarily improved to the point where you can say it's worth 3 times as much as it was before. And a lot of great people teaching universities, but nevertheless, I think that we can just objectively look at all the measures and say, have the student loan programs, especially since the government took them all over, or most of them over, have they helped things? And they haven't. They've actually really, really harmed people. And I get people's argument, this isn't fair because literally you signed a contract and said you're going to pay this back. You're not paying it back. Now the government does use that as a revenue source, and it's going to spread out among everybody else, and that's not fair. But I really think that we need to revisit the whole thing, and to say why are we subsidizing universities to this extent that it's really government and all this funding that has caused the cost of higher education to explode. Meanwhile, it's almost like nowadays a bachelor's degree is the equivalent of what a high school diploma used to be, right? So I think this is actually an opportunity to ask some bigger questions, which probably won't be asked, but nevertheless about the system in its entirety. Also when we look at colleges, frankly, what are they concentrating on? Are they concentrating on skills that kids can use, or are they teaching, the social engineering stuff that the left wants to teach? Overwhelmingly, it's a lot of the other stuff. So I'm wondering why my tax dollars are going to teach kids about things that I disagree with. So I think there's a lot of questions, just not only the should the student loans be forgiven, and no, it's actually, when we think too about the societal effect, it really the effect is still going mostly to people that can't afford to pay their student loans, not to people that can't afford to pay their student loans. The whole thing is it's just a political game by the Biden administration to try to buy votes. But to me, it's a much bigger issue of if our education system, what are the problems and how can they be fixed? And that probably won't ever come up.
Yeah, the problem is school is supposed to be a place to teach kids how to think. Instead, we're teaching them what to think.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and it's concerning because you send your kids to public schools or to a college, and teachers are force feeding their ideologies. They're force feeding them their perspectives and opinions. And kids aren't, especially younger kids, they're not intelligent enough to filter out what makes sense or doesn't make sense. They usually adopt or repeat what adults that they respect say, and so they have huge influence. Like you said, social engineering is a perfect way of putting it, because that's exactly what's going on.
And especially if your professor can pass or fail you. And a lot of that depends on whether you agree with their political ideology or not. And unfortunately, that does happen. And I have kids that tell me, they're in classes and this is what the professor thinks. And if you go against them, you ain't going to pass the class.
Yeah. And when you were growing up in wrestling, or would you guys talk? Obviously, you're on the road together with a lot of friends and people you work with. Would you guys get in these bigger question conversations with any of the guys? And anybody really stick out as inspirational or influential in regards to your thinking? I know Val Venus was one.
Yeah, not really. We talk about current events, but this stuff like that, not really. I mean, it's a workplace, and I actually didn't. It's not like you were around each other that much. I mean, you're around each other at work, and some days, kind of all day. But a lot of times it was just more Republican Democrat stuff as opposed to the more ideological things.
Yeah, well, I think your story it's inspiring. I was also born and on a farm in Portugal, and I, as I get older, I appreciate that farmer's perspective of like just working hard, community, friendships, the importance of those things, of a handshake, of your word, being good to your word, and those type of things. You obviously, I think that influenced some of who you became, because you dealt with some characters that a lot of people would probably just throw in the towel and say, I'm done with this. and you kept going, that's one thing I love about success stories when you share them and you hear the origin story and the background of it, is you hear that before you became, the very famous and the Hall of Famer wrestler and the mayor and this very famous person, you had a lot of bumps in the road. And those the W's, don't make you. It's the L's that make you and mold you. And so do you think that was a big part of just getting some of those morals and hard work ethics from your parents helped kind of deal with some of these bumps in the roads?
Absolutely. I always say I am not defined by my successes. I'm defined by my failures, because I had to overcome those failures to get to where I finally did. And I failed a lot more than I've ever succeeded at stuff. I talked to every senior high school class in Knox County at the start of the school year. And I always tell them that I think the one thing that separates people who are successful, and when I say successful, I'm not talking about making lots of money or anything like that. I'm just talking about living a life that you're content with, that fulfills you, that you feel you're making a contribution. And that's going to be different for everybody, and no one should judge what success is. You're the only person that can do that. But nevertheless, what separates people who have successful lives from people who don't is the successful people simply don't stop until they get what they want. And yes, you see that all throughout every story, is the setbacks and the obstacles. That's really what life is all about, is overcoming those. And if you quit, if you get knocked down, when I hurt my knee, I was ready to throw in the towel, like pretty much on life at that point, because that's all I ever wanted to do. And I'd worked so hard to put myself in a position to just prove that I could do it. I never got that chance. Life just literally ripped it away from me. And life isn't fair. Stuff like that happens. It happens to people. Much worse things happen to people all the time. But at a point I was like, man, I either I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna do what I want to do with my life, or life is just gonna happen. It's just gonna occur whether I choose to participate or not. And there are some people that do that. Life just kind of happens to them. And I overcame that, and then other stuff along the way. And then finally, man, I just got lucky and got a break. And the great thing, though, is that's all you need, is that one break, and it can change your entire life. And the thing that I think is really important to remember, too, though, is the wonderful thing about a place like America is that because of the free enterprise system, and because that we can utilize our talents in different ways, and really our only limitation is our imagination, you can make it here, because you'll get those opportunities. You'll create those opportunities for yourself. There's a lot of places around the world you're never going to get that. Wherever you're born, that's where you're going to stay. And we forget about that. We take that for granted. I remember years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., I was in a cab talking to the cab driver. He was from Africa. We get stuck in traffic. I'm like, having a nice conversation. Finally, I'm like, man, what are you doing here? Like, you left your family, you left everything to move here to drive a cab. And he said, man, I'm not going to be driving this cab forever. I'm going to save my money, and I'm going to buy another cab. Then I'm going to buy another cab. I'm going to have a whole fleet of cabs. And he says, because this is America and anyone can make it here. That dude left his family, left everything, and moved here to drive a cab. And then you have people that are born in this country and have all these opportunities and fuss and complain because their life doesn't turn out like they want to. So yeah, to me, that's it. Is just don't ever give up, and you just keep on going. And hard work plays a big part in that. Resiliency plays a big part in that. But in the end, it's the stubbornness. You ain't going to quit until you get where you want to go. And I really believe anyone can do that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm a big believer that hard work and luck will cross paths, and you just have to keep You
Yep.
just have to
Make your luck.
yeah, yeah, and you'll never, I don't do this podcast full time. That's is the goal because much like yourself, I try to I want to do something that's fulfilling, something that kind of gives back, something that I think is greater than just a 9 to 5 that pays the bills. And I you you never know which show or which episode or when you're going to succeed. You never know which video is going to go viral if you stop making them, right? Like you'll never have a opportunity of a video going viral if you stop making them. So it's really important to just keep doing things. Another thing you said that I think is really important is you know uh there's people out there who have it much worse. Like in America, it's like we have to remember that our worst day is somebody else's best day. There's people out there who are starving. There's people out there who have it much worse. There's a lot of stuff that we complain about here that we should be very grateful for. And I think during when I was younger and getting kind of aware of what's going on in the world, nationalism and being patriotic to me seemed like a tool to get people to like fight unjust wars. And I'm like, oh, this seems a little dangerous. Like this idea of like just being so proud of your country that you're willing to fight somebody else because they're not your country. And that was kind of me looking at it from a negative light. But then during the COVID lockdown, all these people who truly believed in the what America stood for, what the founding fathers stood for, this idea of like you said, state rights, because unlike other countries, we have I have friends in Canada that said like, hey, our government says masks, everybody masks. Our government says this, everybody does the same thing. I can't move to another state that has a closer ideology to my own. Where in America, you could do that. You could go to Tennessee, you could go to Florida, you could go to Texas and be like, okay, I don't agree with these people here, but I can come here. And they build a system where they gave states more control over their people for that purpose. And it was like a beautiful idea, instead of having a federal government kind of just being a dictator and demanding or pushing their views upon everybody else. And so I became very appreciative of the being patriotic and being nationalistic, and I'm like, okay, I see the importance of it, because those were the people who were protesting and fighting and going to school committee meetings, and they're the ones who were outspoken, and those are the ones who are willing to put their careers on the line for those principles. So there, without a doubt, I think it's something that we should definitely appreciate. And I'll never forget this interview with you. It was about a story, and it's funny because I tried to recently look for it, and I've watched so many documentaries that I can't remember which one it was. But you told a story about some little boy. Or a mother who showed you a picture of this little boy, and you got real emotional, and you're like, that's what it's all about. And that, and to me, like, being a parent, it's funny because we all turn into wusses once we have kids. Like we all we get, I'm like, I don't remember getting this emotional over every story, but I remember that like just hit home, because I'm like, damn, that Glenn Jacobs is such a sincere, good dude. And, he's doing things for the purpose of the, more than just a selfish purpose. He wants to help other people in the community. So when you got into politics, I'm like, what a perfect fit, man, because we need people who are willing to go against the grain and be outspoken, even if it wasn't popular, because he felt like there was a greater calling and a greater purpose.
Yeah. You were just talking about nationalism, and when we hear the term nationalism, a lot of times it has those very negative connotations. And at one point in my life, I was like, yeah, man, this is dangerous, right? But I'm where you are now, as far as, America is a great place. We've got our flaws, we got our warts, but we're a very unique place. And what's happened, say, during the lockdowns, for people like me, I'm like, this is not America. This is not my place. It's not, where I grew up, nor, and of course that's kind of, idealized and romanticized in my mind, but nevertheless, and it's not where I want my kids and my grandkids to grow up. And when people ask me why I got into politics, it's because of my grandkids. I have a 13-year-old granddaughter and a 7-year-old grandson. And I look at them and I think, man, what are their lives going to be like? I grew up on a farm in Northeast Missouri. My family didn't have much money, no political connections, no business connections, nothing. Really good, hardworking people. But as far as how is it that someone like me can start there and end up where I have? How is it the people that come from much more humble beginnings than I did achieve greater things than I ever will? And it's because of this thing that we call the American dream, and the fact that you have the freedom and the liberty to make your life what you want it to be. May not always turn out that way, but you get the chance. And then I look at my grandkids and I'm like, are they going to get the chance? That's why I do this. I just want to make sure that they get the chance. And my life's good. I mean, it's been wonderful. It's been great. But I cannot, in good conscience, just say, okay, I'm cool. I took and I took and I took, and allow them to not have those same opportunities, or at least work so that they can have those same opportunities. And I think there are a lot of people out there like that. Actually, I don't think I'm unique.
No, I think there are. The thing is, politics is a very dirty game. And do you ever get discouraged by, well, because I've had Roger Stone on the show years ago. He was kind of an expert of the dirty game of politics, and anybody who really dissects politics and kind of, like Jesse Ventura used to say, it's it's like pro wrestling. Two people will wrestle, and you get caught up in the storyline, like, oh, they must really hate each other, and behind closed doors they're all just selling you a storyline, and they're friends, and they go out to eat and stuff. And politics is the same way. You see it all the time with debates where when Obama and Hillary at a debate, then they'll say all the meanest things to each other. Then once one of them has to support the other one, then all of a sudden all those things that were true become untrue, and all of a sudden they're the best person ever for the job. When you're a sincere good person like yourself, and your heart's in the right place, and you're doing this for moral reasons, is it hard to work to work in a world where everybody's kind of just backstabbing each other, and they're all just trying to get to the next step of their career?
Local government's probably a lot different than Washington, D.C., and I actually don't have to deal with a lot of that here. Folks that I work with are, generally good people. We may disagree on stuff, but it's not because they're corrupt or they're power hungry. I think as you move up to the federal government, you have people that's all that they care about. But I haven't really experienced that. But it is frustrating because you look at the country, kind of big picture stuff, and you're like, what is going on? And this is just ridiculous, and it's stupid, and how can one person make a difference, or why even try? But in the end, I mean, I think it's worth it. I'm a fighter too. I mean, I've spent all my life fighting in one way or another. So I actually kind of like the challenge. And you also have to remind yourself that if good people don't do this stuff, who will? And that, to me, that's actually a terrifying proposition. Because I see that, people don't want to run for public office because campaigns can be so nasty and terrible. Well, we want those people in public office because those are the ones that we can trust. So yeah, it's frustrating. But in the end, I think it's worth it.
That's such an important message to get across, because even locally here with the school board meetings I was going to, a lot of people reached out to me about running for this, right? And then just kind of throwing my name around, rumors started going around, and I'm like, wow, this is really dirty. People, people on forums will start saying stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, and but you have to remind yourself, like you said, if we don't do something, if we're not outspoken, the only people who will get those positions are crazy people who we disagree with.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And I'm fortunate in that I was, used to being in the public eye before I got into this. It's different now, but I just naturally have a pretty thick skin because I realize they're not talking about me personally. Most of the people never even met me. They don't know who I am. They're literally acting to a persona that they've created in their own mind. My wife will get upset about stuff sometimes because she doesn't look at it that way. But I do. And I think that anyone in this position has to realize that, you have to be tunnel vision enough to decide, you can't let those things bother you. And you're going to keep your eye on the ball and you're going to keep moving where you want to move. And it doesn't matter what these people say about you. And in many cases, again, I wouldn't want them to be my friends anyway. So, why would I take criticism from someone that I wouldn't take advice from?
Without a doubt. I have so much respect for your era because it's the one I grew up with, and like most of us, like we think the music we grew up with, the wrestling era we grew up with is the best. And you talked about before the painkillers and all this stuff. Obviously there's some correlation there, and there's it's heartbreaking because I live in Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts during the epidemic of the real epidemic. Young people were dying. I was going, unfortunately, to funerals much more regular than I'd like to for young people, and yet nobody would talk about it. And in wrestling, it's I'm sure you saw a lot of that too. Because you're dealing with pains and injuries, and then you have to, the show must go on. Is that one of the reasons? Did you seeing some of that people maybe becoming addicted to it? And that's the thing, like you get addicted to these pharma drugs, and we don't look at it the same way as like street drugs. It's almost like we dismiss it, and it's like no, we should regulate this, we should do something, or somebody should be responsible for it. I don't know if you ever watched the series Dope Sick, but it was phenomenal. And yeah, you saw it, and it showed how easily you could control the information, and people are seeing kids die from drugs that are prescribed to them instead of street drugs. Is that one of the reasons why, well, I guess I'm assuming that you had friends, and I'm sure you did, because obviously Shawn Michaels and others who got addicted to painkillers, and Jake the Snake, and so many people historically. Is this one of the reasons why that topic is kind of near and dear to your heart too?
Yeah, actually, because I did see a lot of that. Not all of it was due to people having injuries. It was just, the recreational use was. No one realized, I don't think, the damage that could happen. Luckily, I mean, that's not my personality, and I never got into that world. But anyone, it can happen to anyone. That's one of the things that really bothers me about how we talk about substance misuse and addiction. And we still kind of think, oh, it's those people, right? Well, it's not. It's everybody. I mean, I remember when I first got into office, and a local charity does a needle exchange program. And I remember, going over there to visit, and there were people, there were business people there in suits getting needles to shoot heroin. Okay. And I'm just going, good Lord. So it permeates all through society. And then you also have to wonder, gosh, man, in entertainment, it's such a huge issue. And in WWE is a company too. I got to give them big credits. They really have done a lot to try to help. But when I first came in, there was a lot of it, and you're like, these guys all are successful. They got money, and there's something in their life that's caused them to become addicted to these drugs. How much of a chance does someone who doesn't have a whole lot of money and isn't famous, all these things, how much of a chance do they have? So it really convinced me, that it is something that just, it permeates through society. And again, big pharma, man, big pharma is an extremely destructive force. And they sold all these the opioids. Oh, they're not addicting. You got Purdue Pharmaceuticals out there using their sales reps to really push everything. And and that's another thing that just, this drives me nuts is the fact that any reasonable person could look at this and go, wait a second, yeah, these things are addictive. Of course they are, right? But all the scientists, everybody is saying, oh, they're not addictive. So for me, it's yes, that was my big exposure to all of this was when I was in WWE. It's very sad. There's a website that's called whatever, like deadwrestlers.com or something like that. You can find anything on the internet. But it basically, all it is just a list of all the wrestlers who have died before like age 50 or whatever. And so one night, I didn't know why, but anyway, I counted like 30 people on that list that I personally knew, which probably made either overdoses or damage caused by chronic drug use the number one killer of folks that I knew in my own life. Which, again, it was just like, it was shocking to me. So, yeah, that's part of the reason that I got interested in it, because I do have a personal connection. But then you just look at the numbers and you realize, oh my gosh, all of that went to the back burner during the pandemic, but it didn't go away. It just got a whole lot worse, and it was really bad to begin with.
What's your opinions on decriminalizing everything? Portugal did it I think in early 2000s. Is that something that you would be for? I mean, because the way they look at it is more of a mental health issue instead of like a criminal issue, because chances are, like you said, if you're addicted to these, it's because you're unfulfilled. It's because you're trying to self-medicate in some way. And in many cases, I don't know if you're familiar with the rat park experiment, where where they put the substance in the water, they kept coming back to it and died, and then they're like, wait, the cage is a part of the experiment, let's create a giant warehouse where they can run around, recreate the same experiment, and see if they keep coming back. And they didn't. And then they realized, like, oh, okay, it's when they have their natural habitat and things that do, they didn't come back to it. And when they were stuck in a cage unhappy, they did. So it wasn't about quantifying how addictive the substance is. It wasn't so much a substance thing as a internal thing. And I think in many cases that you see that a lot of people who can have a drink at dinner and be okay, and have a drink a night, not a big deal. And then there's the ones who have a drink and they, next thing you know, they're naked somewhere in the street. It's a internal thing. And this goes back to, I guess, the bigger, you hit on it a little bit, the importance of community and family values. These are all things that are being ripped away from society, and like the importance of them are completely just, not existent. And I think they're some of the most important things, because when you look at like the COVID lockdowns, people couldn't go to AA meetings, people couldn't go to church, and it's not, yeah, of course you can pray at home and stuff like that, but it's a community. And I think a lot of things that make us happy is when we're around each other. And when you're in prison, they isolate you from criminals, and that's your punishment, and in time you will lose your sanity. We're social creatures. And so yeah, I think these all hit on a bigger cultural issue of like, okay, are we really progressing? And if we are progressing, why are people more unhappy than ever? Why are people on more anxiety pills and meds and self-medicating more than ever?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The economist in me says it is a demand issue. It's not a supply issue. And we keep on looking at the supply and say, if you can constrain the supply, you're going to solve the problem. And, frankly, it does help. But then what you do is you constrain the supply of opioids. People jump over to fentanyl. Or you constrain the supply of crack, then they start into opioids, and you're playing whack-a-mole because it's not the drug, it's people want it. And how do you figure that out? How do we look on the demand side? And as long as there's demand, there's going to be a supply, and the supply is going to, in this case, will come from criminal elements. So I think, again, it's a big picture thing where we need to really think about the whole thing, and the questions are much bigger than just, how do we interdict this drug shipment? Okay, it's a lot bigger than that. The war on drugs has not worked. Okay. It started with the war on marijuana, and now here we are with these designer drugs that are just super deadly. So I think that as a society, you're exactly right. The first step really needs to be, as communities, what can we do? And it has to be looking at the individuals and figuring out, how can we drive demand for these things down? And it's really hard right now because, again, you look at fentanyl and some of the other heroin derivatives or synthetic heroin and fentanyl analogs that are out there. Grain of sand will kill you. They're deadly. And of course, because they are on the black market, they get mixed with all sorts of stuff. There's no quality control. There's no determining how much is in this pill or how much is in this shot. So there's a lot of issues. The way we're doing it now is not working. We can't incarcerate our way out of the problem. We can only do so much to constrain supply. So I really think that we need, as communities, to look at the demand side and how we help people not to get in this situation to begin with, but then once they're there, how do we get them out in a way that they can have a productive life?
Absolutely. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a busy guy with much to do. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me. Success is different for many different people. This is a sign of success in my life that I had you on the show. It's truly something on the bucket list. And glad that I had the privilege of doing. Thank you so much. Even more importantly, as big as a fan I am of your work on TV and in the ring, being outspoken when it was the hardest to do so, when people were losing friends, losing family, causing friction with others, just for being outspoken and stating that something wasn't right, and you did it. And hats off to that. I can't thank you enough. I was one of those people also. So thank you for all that, for all the work that you continue to do, and thank you for all the memories that you didn't just give me. Now you're giving with my family, because during the COVID lockdown, we went back and we rewatched everything. My kids became WWE historians, and because of that year of lockdown. And so thank you for all that.
Thanks, Ricky. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate it, and hopefully I can come back sometime.
Absolutely. That'd be awesome. Thanks, Mayor Jacobs. Enjoy the rest of your day, and have an amazing weekend, and hopefully we'll keep in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.